Well, what's the old saying? Ask and you shall receive. So the ban announcements for standard and everything else just came out, I think like only like a half an hour ago or something. And it is really, really, really good. It is just pretty much exactly what we were looking for. So I have the 7 cards that were announced as banned in standard right up here on the screen. And I'm actually just kind of like looking through the announcement right now to see if there's any restrictions or anything. I don't think so. I think it really is just the bans. And I wanted to make a little follow-up video here to my first video where I was discussing the potential bans and what I thought would be healthy for standard and what I thought would also be healthy for Magic's future. And for the most part, you know, I didn't get everything right, but I mean, you look at these bans and I wasn't that far off, at least in some of the points that I was making. Not necessarily in exactly which cards were banned, because of the cards that were banned, I exactly pointed out 4 out of the 7 that are here. But I think that some of the things I was saying do kind of carry over into the actual array of cards that are banned here. So I figured I'm just going to make a follow-up video and I'm going to talk about each of these individually, but then there's also some other thoughts that I would like to share. The first thing is that, look, the thing that we wanted to be gone, everybody kept talking about, it is gone, officially, done, finito, we don't have to worry about it anymore. Monstrous Rage is out of here, and thank goodness, man, it has just been heinous to play against this card. Now also, this is on Arena, and I don't think that the client has updated yet, because I did restart and like confirm my game files and everything, and they're all still here. This is like a standard deck that I put together, so, and these cards are technically all playable, so I guess it just hasn't gone through on Arena just yet. But as of about a half hour ago, the announcement went through and it went live. Yes, we no longer have to deal with Monstrous Rage. Thank goodness. This is what everybody wanted. I don't think we need to keep talking about this. It is just done, gone, get out here. Now the next one that pretty much everybody wanted is obviously Cory Steel Cutter, and I talked a lot about the cutter in my last video, and what I was saying is that even though it is a really powerful card and it's kind of like the main engine that drives the Izzet Prowess decks, what I was saying is that, similar to other feelings that people kind of mentioned, is that this card only came out a couple months ago, and to ban it so soon does feel a little brash when it is still a bit of a fresh card. And what I was also saying is that even though this card is really powerful, I felt like its power was a lot greater than just its face value because of the deck that it was playing in. And I'm going to kind of talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. I really did feel like if you had banned a couple other cards in the Izzet Prowess deck, then this card could have potentially stayed. Now that being said, I have also seen a few other people mention that there shouldn't be this ease of access to trample in red, like this ease of access to cheap trampling cards in red, which I do agree with. Trample is primarily a green mechanic, and when there's too much of it in red and you can do it for cheap and do it so easily, it does feel a little overwhelming. So to that end, you know, similar to Monstrous Rage, I guess it is better to just, you know, get rid of the easy access to trample here. So again, what pretty much everybody wanted, not everybody agreed on exactly which cards should be banned, but pretty much everybody agreed that Monstrous Rage should go, and almost every single person almost also said get Cory Steel Cutter out of here. So pretty much the first 2 things that we wanted to go are gone. Now I've organized these by color, obviously, and the next one was a little bit surprising, but once I thought about it, I just realized how much this made sense. So Heartfire Hero is gone, not Manifold Mouse, right? Not Emberheart Challenger, but Heartfire Hero. And I think that there is an important reasoning behind this. So obviously, this is the primary 1-drop of all those aggressive red decks, right? You could play like Monastery Swiftspear or like one of the lizards, right? Or the, you know, but this thing is just gets out of hand so fast, because if you have a Manifold Mouse, or if you have the Village in play, or if you have the Monstrous Rage or any other pump spell, right? This thing just grows and grows and grows every single turn. And by turn 4, it's got 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and then you can't even kill the damn thing, because if it kills the damn thing, if you kill it, then it's going to do damage to your face, right? But here's the thing, there's something I realized, and I think Wizard realized it as well. When I was watching the Pro Tour last weekend, what I noticed is that there's a really big play that you can make, and it involves 2 other cards. So those 2 other cards are Self-Destruct and Screaming Nemesis. Just take a second. Do you see how what you're gonna do with these cards? So what you're gonna do here is you're gonna pump Heartfire Hero from one turn to the next turn to the next turn. By the way, Self-Destruct also pumps Heartfire Hero because it targets it, right? So let's say this thing has some absurd power. Let's say it's like an 8, right? Let's say this thing has 8 power. Well, what you do is you Self-Destruct Heartfire Hero. Heartfire Hero dies, and then you can target your opponent for 8 damage, right? Well, after you've already attacked with your Screaming Nemesis, then what you do is you target Heartfire Hero's power onto Screaming Nemesis. Screaming Nemesis takes 8 damage. And then guess where that 8 damage is being redirected because of Screaming Nemesis's ability? Right to your opponent. So it's literally 16 damage or whatever. It could be more. It could be 20. It could be 18, 14, 10, whatever the amount. It's ridiculous. It's a huge play. And look, it's not that hard to do. You have both of these things on the field. You have a Self-Destruct in your hand. Okay, target this, boom. You just like lost tons and tons of life. It's a crazy, crazy play. And I want to talk, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this because there's a couple other points in my last video that I want to kind of bring back, but this is probably the main reason why Wizards decided to ban Heartfire Hero, because of this play in specifically. And also look, even if Monstrous Rage is out, you still can't block this thing. You can't block it because as soon as it dies, it's going to do 8 damage to your face or something like that, or it's going to do 8 damage to your best creature or your whatever, you know, and it's gonna run you over even without the trample, right? So there's still a lot of pump spells in standard, and if you just keep pumping Heartfire Hero over and over and over again, because look, you're probably not gonna block this thing when it only has like 2 power, right? Well, it gets pumped, and the next turn it gets pumped, like this uncommon right here is incredibly annoying. And it's just not fun. It's not fun. You can't even remove it. You can't remove it. Okay, you played your removal spell on it. Your go for the throat or whatever. Okay, you're going to take 6 damage. You're going to take 8 damage. Whatever. You're going to take 5 damage. You have to exile this thing. So it makes sense that this card has been banned. This is one of the most annoying cards in Standard right now, in my opinion. Even though it's not necessarily the most powerful in the mono red. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about this. So this again, I think the Self-Destruct with the Heartfire Hero, the Screaming Nemesis, this is the main reason why this card was taken away, right? Well, Screaming Nemesis was one of the cards that I asked to be banned in my last video, and I wasn't really getting flamed for it, which I do respect. You know, I feel like deservedly I could get flamed for asking Screaming Nemesis to be banned. You know, I feel like I'm not upset with like any of the comments or anything on my last video or any of the feedback I've gotten, because you know, I do think, again, my thoughts and opinions were a little bit against the grain, and I can see why people would not agree with them. But what I was saying with Screaming Nemesis is that this thing is still a menace. No pun intended. The fact that it would be different, I would feel totally different if this card simply said, instead of this line of text right here, the rest of the game, if instead it just said players can't gain life, I would be fine with it, because then if you remove it, then you can gain life. But the fact that you can have this thing on the field and then you can just like shock it for 1 mana and then do this thing that lasts the entire game, you can't gain life for the entire game. So even when you remove it, you still can't gain life. That is absurd to me. It's just so absurd. Like, the fact that you can't gain life for the rest of the game. Like, if it said something else, you know, this is what I said in my last video. If it said something else, if it said like damage can't be prevented, or you get hexproof, or I don't know, like players can't cast spells on your turn or something like that, maybe. Well, maybe not that one. That one's a little like that one's a little, you know. but still, just something that wasn't so debilitating for the entire game. The entire game, you're gonna shock this thing for 1 mana, and now for the entire game, I can't gain life. That just is nuts to me. Like, even if you remove it, it doesn't fix anything. So I don't know. I always felt like this card was just, ever since this card was first released, I've always felt like it had too much going on, you know? I would also feel different if it was more mana, if it was 4 mana, if it was 5 mana, even if it was a stronger creature, then I think it wouldn't be so overbearing. But again, the fact that this right here, the rest of the game, that is just absurd to me. The rest of the game. If it just said players can't gain life, and then you can't gain life while it's on the field, but then you remove it, I think it would be totally fine as is. And it would still be ridiculously overpowered, or ridiculously strong. But the fact that it's just, you remove it and it doesn't matter, and the fact that your opponent can just do that in response. You're going to remove my nemesis? Okay, guess what? You can't gain life for the rest of the game. Like, what the hell? So anyway, that being said, I'm sorry that I kind of went off on too much of a tangent about that. But again, this is, I think, why Heartfire Hero is gone, because of this combination of cards. And, you know, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about Screaming Nemesis once I saw that, since again, I think that's primarily why it was banned. And, you know, again, I had some strong feelings about Screaming Nemesis. So Heartfire Hero, Monstrous Rage, Core Steelcutter, those are the red cards that have been banned. So moving on to the next one that I think everybody's very happy to see, which is Abuelo's Awakening. Granted, it's not the actual ban that I asked for and other people asked for, which is Omniscience. And the reason why I asked for Omniscience to be banned as opposed to Abuelo's Awakening is because Omniscience is going to be legal and standard for the next 4 years or something, because it's in Foundations. And Wizards needs to be very careful, right? They need to be very careful with this card, because it can easily just run like wildfire if it's not kept in check. Because Abuelo's Awakening, you can bring it back for only 4 mana and then win the game. But look, there are 5 mana enchantment spells that can come back as well, right? So that is another way that this card could potentially just be too strong to keep, under control. And again, what I was saying is that, look, so what are they going to do now? They're not going to ever print enchantment reanimation spells again in standard. Like, no, there's definitely going to be, for the next 4 years, right? The next 4 years, there's definitely going to be more enchantment reanimation. But I guess if, as long as they keep it, they definitely can't have 4 mana, right? You definitely can't do 4 mana enchantment reanimation spells while Omniscience is still in standard. That would be a huge mistake. There was another card called Repair and Recharge that is 5 mana to bring back to reanimate an enchantment, but that's rotating out in the next set. So seemingly the Omniscience decks really have lost a lot of momentum right now, because there's not really too many ways to reanimate the Omniscience, because it's not a creature, right? It's just an enchantment. So to that end, maybe the Abuelo's Awakening was the right ban to do at this moment, and then potentially if the Omniscience decks kind of lose, get a little bit too crazy, then they could ban it later on. So to that end, I guess it was the right thing to do, because with this out, the Omniscience decks lose a lot of steam. They're not totally unviable though. You can still play that, but it's just definitely on a more balanced level, right? Next one, oh baby. I called this one out. The first 3 that I said were Monstrous Rage, Core Steelcutter, and Omniscience. And the next one I said is you gotta get rid of the beans. And I was correct. You gotta get rid of the beans. This card needed to be banned a while ago. It needed to be banned when Domain Overlords was going crazy. And I also gave this example that, I have a Sultai Dragons deck that I like to play. And if I play this on turn 2, and then I play Rakshas's Bargain on turn 3, guess what? I get a card off of the Up to the Beanstalk trigger, and then I get to look at 4 cards, and then draw 2 more. That is just insane. That is insane value for the first 3 turns of the game. It is absolutely nuts. And, look, green is the weakest color in standard right now. So to that end, green just lost pretty much one of its best cards, right? But I think it's still the right thing to do. For one thing, Esper Origins is actually a pretty decent replacement for the Beanstalk. I mean, it's a sorcery and not an enchantment, but still, this is a really good card. You get to Surveil 2, then gain 2 life, and then the next time you cast it for 4 mana, 4 mana is, you know, you play this turn 2, and then you play something else turn 3, you play this turn 4, right? You bring it back, you flash it back, and you get to not only surveil and gain 2 life again, but then you also essentially draw a card. Because look, reveal the top card of your library, right? Reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a permanent, you put it into your hand. So you essentially draw a card if it's a permanent. Now it is revealed, but then you get 2 mana, and then you get the +2/+2 and trample. So this is not a bad... I feel like a lot of green decks are going to run the Esper Origins in place of the Up the Beanstalk. And I think this is, you know, a really solid card, but it's more balanced. It's more balanced than the Beanstalk that just kind of like goes crazy all the time, right? But this is good. You know, you get 4 life from using it twice. That's a nice way to kind of stabilize yourself. And then you get all this other value. So it was a really, really good decision to ban Up the Beanstalk. You can't like nerf a whole bunch of decks and then just have like the next best card just still exist. That makes no sense, right? So this was the right thing to do. Get rid of the Beanstalk. It should have been gone a while ago. So next up is actually one that I wasn't expecting. I was not expecting This Town Ain't Big Enough to go. And I'm not really sure why. Like why right now this card has been banned. It was a little bit more powerful, I feel like, before the release of Dragonstorm and before the release of Final Fantasy. But right now, I don't think this was the primary blue card that needed to go. And I'm going to kind of come back to that in a second. I mean, obviously, look, it is very much a card, right? It is very much a card. We know what this does. You got all these Dimir decks and all these Esper decks running this card to bring back their enchantments that then they're going to play again, and then they get the bounce your thing and blah, 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 right? So, and certainly control decks as well, and you get to re-trigger certain effects when you replay the cards that you've bounced back to your hand. So I can kind of see it, but at the same time, I don't know if it was the right blue card to be banned. I mean, one thing that you'll realize here is that there is a ban in every single color, right? Every color has at least one ban, which I also think was a really good idea, but I don't think that this was like the primary blue card that needed to go. To that end, I guess I'll talk a little bit more about that. I think the primary blue card that needs to go was Stock Up. And I spent a long time talking about Stock Up in my last video. This is just a nutty card for only 3 mana. This thing is just one of the best draw spells that has ever been printed in Magic, and it's only an uncommon. And it's the primary reason for me why the Izzet Prowess decks are going out of control. It's not because of the Cori Steelcutter. In my opinion, it's because of the Stock Up. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So I have a few more cards over here that I'm just going to kind of pull out to discuss it in a little bit more detail. So the thing with the Stock Up is that, yes, Cori Steelcutter is the thing that's actually physically running you over, because that's where all the creatures are coming from, and they all have trample, they all have haste and all this stuff, right? But the Stock Up is the engine that just allows that deck to just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, right? And it's not only just the Stock Up. Like, you know, most of those decks run 4 copies of Stock Up. Not all of them, but not all versions. But the thing is, it ain't 4 copies of Stock Up because of this. You ain't playing against 4 copies of Stock Up, man. You're playing against 8 copies of Stock Up. Because as soon as this thing gets to level 2, guess which card they always reach for? Bop. They always reach for the Stock Up. They play Stock Up on turn 4, then they cast a 1-mana spell, they activate Cori Steelcutter, or they might have Vivi on the field, and now Vivi's going nuts, right? And then the next turn after that, they're gonna level this up, and then the turn after that, they're gonna play it again and do it all over again. These 2 things, these are the things driving these decks into infinity. See, it's one thing to like play an aggro deck and then do all this really cool stuff, you know, activate your Cori Steelcutter, play multiple things, blah, blah, blah. But then eventually you run out of gas, right? You run out of gas because, ah, shoot, I played all my stuff. But these 2 things together, the gas is always there. They never run out of gas. They don't run out of gas until the game is over or they reach no cards in their library anymore, you know? So this is why I'm really thought that Stock Up was the better choice to ban. And to that end, even though the Cori Steelcutter is gone, I don't know how much momentum these Izzet Prowess decks are really going to lose. They essentially banned 2 cards from those decks, right? The Monstrous Rage and then the Cori Steelcutter. Now, those are 2 really powerful cards, and they ensure that you can't block because they give them their things trample, right? But still, with the VV and the Storm Chaser's Talent and the stock up with these 3 cards still in those decks, you know, these 3 right here. I don't know, man. I have a feeling like these decks are still going to be really, really strong. I really think the better choice would have been to ban stock up. And it's not only the Is It Prowess decks, like stock up is just really powerful in all the control decks and everything too. Granted, the control decks are just really weak right now. Like the main thing is that, you know, the aggro decks never run out of value because they keep playing things like stock up, right? And all this other stuff. But still, I just thought stock up was too good of a card for 3 mana, and it's still here. It is very much still here. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. But again, the same engine is still here, the Storm Chaser's Talent and the stock up. So, you know, obviously this is a very graveyard heavy meta. It pretty much has been for the past few months. So we're definitely still going to keep running that graveyard hate because for one thing, with these bans, the Golgari decks are probably going to be pretty good. The Reanimation Enchantment deck is probably going to be pretty good. And then you still got this, right? You still got stock up in the graveyard when there's a Storm Chaser's Talent on the field. So you better get rid of that Storm Chaser's Talent, or you better exile that stock up. So otherwise those decks are never going to run out of fuel to keep doing what they're going to be doing. And, you know, interesting enough, just like kind of a final point on that is that some people were asking for VV to be banned, which I don't think would be good. You don't want to ban a card like only a week after the set has been released. Like, come on, you know. But I really do think that stock up was the better choice to ban instead of This Town Ain't Big Enough. But still, This Town Ain't Big Enough is a really strong card, right? And it's a blue card, so now the blue decks got a bit of a hit while all the other colors did too. So last one, I saved the best one for last because this is the one that I was kind of like, you know, in my last video, this was one of the cards where I was a little bit like, I feel like I'm reaching a little bit, but I feel like I'm also right. I feel like I'm making good points, and that is freaking Hopeless Nightmare. So what I was saying in my last video, I wasn't just talking about Hopeless Nightmare. Like I was saying how if you nerf one deck, then you got to nerf the next deck, and you got to nerf the next deck, and then you got to nerf the next deck, right? Because the power level in standard is just too high. There's just too many ridiculous decks, too many ridiculous power. There too much ridiculous power. The 3-year cycle for standard was so stupid. They need to go back to the old. I personally don't even think it should be like a 2-year cycle. I think you should just go back to block sets. Just go back to block sets and core set. That was when I liked standard the most. So anyway, I'm a bit of an old head in that regard. But so you know, that's what I was saying is that it doesn't matter if you ban a few cards because then the next deck is just going to take over. And the deck that I said people really need to be worried about was the Pixie decks because they have so much value between Pixie, Sun Pearl Kirin, Fear of Isolation, right? Or This Town Ain't Big Enough, right? But and also not just the Pixie decks, even the Dimir decks, you know. And I guess maybe that's why the This Town Ain't Big Enough is primarily gone, is because of the Dimir decks, which I think is that was a little bit clairvoyant on Wizards' part. So maybe that's why. Maybe that's the reason why This Town Ain't Big Enough is gone, because of the Dimir decks with Kaido and everything. But so the point that I'm saying though is that if you just leave it at that, guess what? The next deck in line is going to take over. And what I was saying about Hopeless Nightmare is that you play this thing on turn 1, you take an opponent's card, and they lose 2 life. They play Pixie, and then they replay this thing, and now 2 turns into the game, you have lost 4 life and 2 cards. And guess what? Your opponent has a 2/2 flyer on the field. That is insane. That is an insane start to the game. It's absolutely nuts. Like, I'm just so glad that they banned this card, because it's not only that. I'm getting a little excited. It's not only that. Like black is honestly, with the red nerfs, black might be the strongest color in standard right now, because of all the demons and the Golgari and the Annex and the discard. See, the discard in black is just so overbearing between the saga that causes you to discard cards, and then you get to draw cards when you're and gain life and stuff when your opponent has too few cards in your hand, and all the other discards, you know, Liliana and the Momentum Breaker and everything else, right? It's a really debilitating deck to play against, and Hopeless Nightmare is the linchpin for all of those decks that I mentioned. The Pixie decks, the Dimir decks, the Esper decks, the discard decks, and taking this out is just the right thing to do. It is so annoying to play against this card. It is, and by itself, it's not that bad. Just one mana, enchantment comes down, discard a card. Okay, yeah, that's fine. But you got all these ways to make it happen again and again and again and again and again. And it's just, oh, dude, it's just like jabbing you over and over and over again. You can't really do anything about it. So, banning this was the right decision, and I'm personally very happy and proud of myself that I was able to make the point in my last video that this card needs to go, and I think it's valid. You know, I think it's warranted. So I pretty much did, talk about everything that I wanted to discuss here. The main one that I was really hoping that would go that didn't was Screaming Nemesis. Well, actually, I guess there's two, right? There's the Stock Up and the Screaming Nemesis. These were the two that I was really, really hoping would go, and then they ended up not. So, and I know people are going to disagree with me about the Screaming Nemesis, but, you know, I said what I said. I stand by it. I think that this card, the fact that it's the rest of the game, these few words right here, if this was just missing from the card, I think it would be fine. But the fact that it's rest of the game, this is what just, gives this card way too much value, in my opinion, for only 3 mana. And Stock Up, same thing. It's one of the best draw spells we have ever had. And I am a little bit concerned that those Izzet decks are not going to slow down too much, even though they lost their primary damage dealing things here between Corey Steelcutter and Monstrous Rage, right? I think those decks could potentially, those decks might run Emberheart Challenger. I think that's the best substitute. They might also run Screaming Nemesis. I don't know, but we'll see what happens with the Izzet decks and how they end up shaping up with these bans. I'm very happy about these bans. I'm sure a lot of people are very happy about these bans. The main thing is that the power level in Standard is going to be brought down. That's what needs to happen. And I can't really think of a deck that we're really going to have to worry about now, other than Mono Black Demons. That one's going to be a strong one, or even Mono Black, not necessarily Demons, but with Cecile, the new knight from the Final Fantasy set. And then also I think the Izzet Prowess decks are still going to be really strong. But otherwise, I don't know. I can't really think of one that we're really going to need to be worrying about too much. Golgari is going to be strong. So definitely make sure to have that Graveyard Hate in there. I think we may even want to start main decking Graveyard Hate, honestly, because there's still going to be so many decks that use the Graveyard. But otherwise, I think this is just very good. They banned a card from each color. Perfect. That's definitely something that was needed. And they banned many of the cards that were horrible to deal with. So I am very satisfied. I'm very relieved. And I'm sure other people are too. As I said in my last video, I'm not necessarily trying to convince people of anything or change people's minds. I'm just trying to share what I think. And look, I say some things that are against the grain, and I think it's totally valid if people don't agree with what I'm saying. I'm a little bit out there. I don't necessarily go with what everybody else thinks, right? There definitely aren't a lot of people who think that Screaming Nemesis needs to be banned, right? But I do, and I appreciate the feedback that anybody gives, and I'm just really, really glad that something was done. And I'm sure everybody else is also really relieved that something was done. So that wraps this up. Again, I talked a lot more than I should have, but I just had a lot to say. So I will see you all in the next video.